technology is always changing on us. We've got best practices to follow. We've got to adhere to all these accessibility standards. We need to know what they are, and it can get a little bit hectic. But the hardest part can be that in order to really get web accessibility happening in your company, everybody's got to be part of it. You have to have everybody. And just the designer does it, or just one or two developers do it, it's going to fall apart at the seams. It has to start at the beginning and be carried through all the way to the end. So that's easier said than done, and this is why. We have to focus on doing the right thing, because making websites accessible for as many people as humanly possible is the right thing to do. We know that it is our responsibility, because everybody deserves to use everything online. They do. It's the right thing to do. So how do we pitch it? How do we integrate web accessibility into our company culture in a way where it's going to stick? Essentially, we need to shift the paradigm. We need to change this from being like, oh, this would be really nice to do if we had some extra hours in the budget. So at the end, we'll see if there's anything left over, and if there is, maybe we'll do it. Because, show of hands for our web developers, who has ever seen extra hours happen in a budget? Really? Every now and then, but really not. So we really need to try to make that shift. Instead of this being a nice to have, this is a need to have. The last company where I worked, we started out with pretty much no concept of web accessibility whatsoever. It wasn't a thing. Most of the developers had never even heard of it. And when I began to standardize or specialize, I made it a priority to bring it to the table and make this a company-wide web accessibility initiative, which successfully took root and is now integrated into their process all the way starting at sales through production. And I'm not going to lie, it was really, really hard. It was a battle pretty much the whole way through because change is really tough, especially when there are a lot of people that have to sign off on it. So I hope this walkthrough of a successful implementation will help you blaze your own trail. There's 3 main steps that I have found to be really effective for getting this ball rolling, and that's inform, integrate, and advocate. So the first step is to start planting those little seeds with some information. Start talking to your coworkers and get people excited. The best people to get excited are people who are really excitable and loud and that will hang on to it and carry it with you. Because once it starts to spread, enthusiasm is infectious, and then you've got everybody enthusiastic and it's great. It just keeps rolling with that synergy. And a good way to interest developers is to show some cool nerd tricks. You know, whip out the screen readers, turn on the wave tool, be like, hey, check out these cool CSS tricks, it's awesome. And a good strategy for distributing that information really quickly is to hold a demo. And your best chance with a demo is, hey guys, I'm going to do a demo on web accessibility this afternoon if anyone wants to come and learn some cool tactics. Also, there will be pizza and beer. Pizza and beer is the magic phrase for a good demo turnout. One thing, you don't want it to be a burden. You don't want to irritate your coworkers with it, so you need to roar softly. Because if you put a bad taste in people's mouths, they're not going to take another bite. We want their mouths to taste like pizza and beer, so that they keep doing this. So, share what you know. Most people in our industry are really clever, love information, want to learn everything they can. So in peer reviews, bring it up. Like, hey, just so you know, this isn't really accessible, and explain why. Go a little deeper than just, this needs to be this because of this. Like, hey, if you do it like this, it'll work for this, this, and this. Give them a little bit more of an explanation. And again, make it fun. So now your developers are getting on board, and that's an awesome foundation. But we haven't poured our concrete yet. So people get excited, and they're jazzed up, and they do it for like a week, and everybody's like, yeah! And then everybody forgets, and nobody really does it, and that project rolls out, and nobody ever really did it. So all those good intentions really didn't do anything for our end user, as much as we like sprinkling glitter around. So the next step is to integrate. We're going to want to integrate this into our company's processes really well so that it sticks. And it's great to have developers that know how to make things accessible and want to make things accessible. But we'll need a little more sticking to avoid the shortcuts and check our work. And we need a little more time for that, right? So we need to bring sales into the solution. It's not a lot of time, but we need a little time. And it's not extra time. It's the time that is required to make a quality product. We're not asking for extra time. We're asking for the right amount of time. And we'll need designers that are making designs that are compatible with accessible functionality so that we're not retrofitting later. We want to start right at the beginning with the comps. And we're going to need some structure so that we don't forget and stop doing it. So we need management to buy in too and get all that going. So it takes a village to really implement web accessibility. So let's put our processes in place. Depending on how large your company is, asking for stuff is going to be easier or harder, depending on how close to the top of the chain you are. So for me, it was really convenient because the person I had best access to was the CEO. So I sat down across from his desk and I said, hey, this needs to happen. And executives are busy people. They don't have time for a pipe dream. They don't have time for you to want them to do it for you. So your best tool is you're going to have a plan. I went in there, everything fleshed out. This is who needs to do what. This is when it needs to happen. This is how it needs to happen. Have a plan laid out. Your next is to explain the benefits. This is great for the company because we're going to pull in clients that are looking for AA and AAA accessibility. This is great for the company because this will have your developers adhering to best practices. This is good for your company. The next step is don't make work for the person who needs to say yes. When you go trying to get an approval stamp on something, don't make it more work for the person that has to agree to it. Say, I'm going to do this. We're going to do this. I need you to nod your head and say that this is awesome and we're doing this. Because that's a very easy thing for them to say yes to when they don't have to do it. So that was one of my main tactics there. Once you're approved, I worked with the directors of each department to integrate web accessibility through all of the process. So I had sales start to introduce AA web accessibility as a standard feature, right when they met with clients for the first time. Hey, we do this. It's great because you're not going to lose 10 to 20% of your business. You're not cutting off your revenue stream. Clients love to hear that revenue stream. So that started right at the beginning of the conversation. We did workshops with the design teams so that they weren't designing features that aren't web accessible. No nested drop-down menus or anything that's a huge pain. So they started wireframing things properly from the start. And for our development and our launch team, we put checklists in place. And before we launched anything, they had to go through the entire checklist, run it through the Wave tool, have someone manually look this over, run it through the screen reader. And it couldn't launch until all of these check marks had been done. So with that process in place, every single time, it wasn't easily forgotten. And of course, I made myself accessible. While all of this was going on and people were catching on, I was always there. Hey, I have a question. Hey, will this work this way? Make the time. Your final step is to advocate. Web accessibility isn't just about the technical details, it's about the attitude. The human aspect of it is integral. Most people do not care about a checkpoint in a list of standards. They don't care. Okay, it has to do that, all right. But when you bring the human element into it, people care about people. So you don't want to say, hey, this isn't 508 compliant. You want to say, hey, someone blind won't be able to apply to that. Because that brings the human back into it, and that's really important. I lost my spot. So don't be afraid to speak up and to initiate a dialogue. For instance, I do not use the R word sarcastically, and it's hurtful to the friends and the families of developmentally disabled. So I encourage others to pick a better adjective when I hear it. Like, hey, you can say ridiculous. You catch yourself just in time. Let's not use that word. And by gently reminding people that it's hurtful, I've gotten almost everyone I know to stop saying it. So really just speak up a little bit and it can carry really far. So that's really important, to breed a culture of compassion and consideration throughout your company, starting from the inside all the way out to your output. And before I stop talking, I'm just going to share a quick personal story with you. I don't know if you're like me and you're clumsy, but I fell off the monkey bars a lot when I was a kid. And if you never did that, I'll explain it. It happens in a few stages, all really quickly. You have that second where you miss the bar. You're like, oh no, I'm falling. And you've got that 1 second where you're like, oh, and then you're on the ground. And maybe there's time to register it, but really not deeply. You're just like, oh no, thud. And then you have the impact. And for just a second, it doesn't hurt. And you're still processing that you fell. And then suddenly this unexpected pressure of cold ground is on you, and your brain is catching up to your physical state. You're making this harsh discovery, like, oh, I'm on the floor now. And then it hurts. And it's like a deep, breathless pain that goes from your back to your chest, and it kind of feels like you're dying. And once you catch your breath again, the experience kind of sticks with you. So that's how it felt when web accessibility became my passion. I wasn't on the monkey bars, I was online, as I'm apt to be, and I was playing around in Bloglandia, because before I had a real job, I was in school, and I did a lot of work with special needs moms, making their blogs and little support websites accessible. And somebody wrote something really nasty, and they weren't being a troll, which was actually worse, because they meant it. And the discussion was about a little girl named Amelia Rivera, and she needed a new kidney. And she was denied for this kidney by the Children's Hospital because she was intellectually disabled, and they said she wasn't worth it. And someone wrote, there's a distinct difference between a human and a person. And the points are consciousness, reasoning, the developed capacity to solve new and complex problems, self-motivated activity, the capacity to communicate on various topics and infinitely many topics, the presence of self-concept and self-awareness. And then I was a kid again. I was on the cold sand, just wind knocked out of me, couldn't breathe. And then I just cried this ugly, nasty cry for a while. I was just like, oh my god, I can't believe I even read that. And it kind of burned me inside really hard. So now being an advocate for web accessibility means a lot more than just getting to play with cool technology. It's my promise to honor every individual with their personhood. So when people ask me why I care about web accessibility, I say, because everyone deserves to use everything online. But to me, it really means a lot more. So thanks for letting me share my story with you. And I do look forward to meeting as many of you as possible, so please come say hi. I do not bite. You can catch me on IRC, you can email me, Twitter me, whatever. I'm around. And I did want to leave a chunk of time just for discussion. If anybody had questions hey, this client's kind of being a dick, what can I do? Or if anybody wants to spitball. Do we have any? Hi.
So do you include this with every client, or do you say this is an opt-in for the client, or does the client say, don't do this for my site?
I've never had a client be like, please don't make my site accessible. But we do have some clients that send their own comps. So sometimes we need to go back and be like, hey, that design is really cool, but X amount of people won't be able to use it, so we might need to change this. And sometimes it's a little bit of back and forth that way, but usually you can get people to sign on. That's it.
What was the biggest one you had for an internal struggle in terms of getting buy-in?
Ooh.
Sales?
Probably sales, because they were really concerned that putting more hours into the project was going to make it really difficult to sell. And when I explained to them, look, laws are changing, look at Canada, that's going to be the US soon, and then these are all going to have to be retrofitted. So this needs to be done from the get-go, and eventually that battle was won, but it was tricky initially, yeah.
Is that different between the industries?
What do you mean?
If you're selling to, say, a public entity or a school versus a private business?
Oh, honestly, I wouldn't know. We had all private businesses, so we didn't really work with the public sector at all. But you guys are lucky to hear this.
So I came a little late, but you mentioned the laws in Canada. Doesn't the ADA cover accessibility in the States?
Not really. I mean,
More built environment for the space.
Yeah, that's more like wheelchair ramps and things
Yeah.
like that. I mean, some people have tried to use the ADA
To
to back lawsuits and things, but for the most part, they say there's not a legal requirement.
I thought it was pretty
It's unfortunate, but yeah, they're kind of like, oh, that stinks. But they're trying to make it now where public entities have to do it, but it's still not in ink.
Billy has a nice video about that.
Yeah?
There's episode 1. So, if you want a picture show,
Yeah.
You just did. Me and Carl Groves do a web series called The Viking and the Lumberjack, and it's on YouTube. You just search Viking and Lumberjack. There's probably very few other options for that search criteria. We did a whole episode on the ADA and celebrating its anniversary. Basically, to answer your question in the same way, basically what happens is the ADA say that their law expands and carries over to the web, but the letter of the law does not explicitly state that. So that's where a lot of those legal loopholes come in. They're able to dodge a lot of cases. So, yeah, they give lip service to people with disabilities saying, "Oh no, really, this applies to you," but then in the court they're like, "No, wait." Yeah. You want to see a much more sarcastic take on that than most.
Is there an argument to bring to like clients to say, hey, if we don't build in accessibility at the get-go, if you then try to retrofit it in a later date, it's going to cost you more?
Sure. I mean, you can always make that argument. You don't want them to feel like you're pressure selling them, though.
Right.
Because the last thing you want is for them to feel like you're doing it to make more money. Like, hey, we want to pad your project with a little bit of this. It's better to just explain all the positives and let them come to that decision on their own, rather than trying to, like, shove them into it, because then they feel like it's a sales pitch instead. It's like, hey, this is great, because this. Oh, yeah, I want that.
Make them feel like it's their idea.
Exactly. Just lead them there, and then have them be like, oh, I'm here. Yeah, definitely.
It's just a stick.
A stick?
In Canada, it's a stick.
I like that.
It's the law.
See, we have no such stick, but yeah, that's really nice. Maybe one day. Hopefully. Anybody else? Yeah? All right.
thank you very much. So, it seems like we've got a little bit of time. Billy, do you mind if we maybe pop up your episode 1 that talks about ADA?
Yeah, sure. Maybe if you want.
This one, it might work this time, like it didn't quite at hand.
You don't need me to do
No, I
anything.
think
I don't have to
just
participate.
put on. Unless you want to do a commentary or a color commentary.
I want no such thing.
No? Everything is said?
Everything.
Alright.
Let's see.
Let's verify that your statement that we go to YouTube